Well, I really appreciate you giving me an update, and I agree with you. I think we're probably going to have to schedule, maybe move that review up a couple of weeks so that we can address some of these concerns. Because this as you've pointed out, this isn't the first time, and his behavior seems to be really escalating. Okay, great. Thanks, Debbie. Bye-bye. Hi, my name is Carol Pope, and I'm Cody Lang's social worker with Metro Children's Aid Society. I met with Cody the other day. He's actually he's very consistent about meeting with me. We have quite a good relationship, and I talked with him about kind of this idea of actually telling his story and actually having a visual representation of his story, and hopefully he'll agree to do that.
Hi, my name's Cody. I'm here to tell you about my story. My worker says that it'd probably be a good idea for me, but I'm not really so sure about it, but she's the boss, right? So what she says, I guess, goes around here.
Before I can really talk about his current functioning, I really need to give an idea, a perspective, kind of a social history of when I actually became aware of Cody, and also the agency's knowledge of his birth mom. Because Cody Lang had a rough start pretty well from even in utero. He had real difficulty. His mom, Crystal, was known to one of the more popular shelters in Toronto, and she was a street-involved young woman who became pregnant at a very young age. We do not know who Cody's biological father was, but we have received enough information to inform us that he was also a street-involved youth. And Crystal was actually staying at the shelter when she gave birth to Cody.
So I'll start by telling you about my mom. She was a CAS kid like myself. Pretty much did every drug and drink she could get her hands on, sort of like me. I guess that's where I get it from. Her name, I call her Crystal, but it's a total guess. I don't really know what her name is, but I like that name, so that's what I call her.
We don't know a lot about her early life, but we do know that that she was living in the foster care system, that she was really difficult to contain, and the foster parents had a lot of difficulty keeping her safe and also having her follow any kind of rules and routines. And so, like many of the young women who were in the system at that time, she found herself on the streets and getting involved in street life. So when she was pregnant with Cody, the shelter staff notified us, and I actually met with Crystal, and we talked about some of the realistic options. And of course, like most young women, because she was 15, she wanted to keep Cody and have him stay with her and be his mom. When he was born, I went out and I met with them. We did have some public health supervision, going out, trying to work with her, tried to give her all of the skills and supports that she would need to be a good mom, but she wasn't able to really make use of those.
All right, so I guess from the beginning we bounced around from shelter to shelter, and I think it was about a year and a half into my life, and then I guess that's when someone made the call to CAS, and then boom, all of a sudden I'm a CAS kid, and I haven't heard from Crystal since then.
His presentation was that of a failure to thrive child. So he was very, very difficult to soothe. He was constantly worrying his skin, and he had scabs, and you could tell that he was a very distressed child, and his temperament was very unpredictable. The shelter staff found him to be very challenging to work with and to take care of. And at the same time, Crystal started returning to the shelter less and less. So it became pretty clear to us that we were going to have to look at placing Cody.
So I guess back then I was a bit of a mess, about a year and a half old, and I guess I was pretty much like any shelter kid would be. I didn't really like to play with anyone else, you know. I was dirty. I guess I had like scabs all over me and stuff, and my mom wasn't really there for me. She was more interested in getting loaded or getting high or whatever.
He went from the shelter into 3 different foster homes, and he moved through the system in the way that that kids often do. The staff were very concerned about his inability to respond to them. He had quite kind of a blunted affect. He presented as a failure to thrive child. He was underweight. He didn't eat a lot, and he didn't seem to have much interest in his surroundings, or could he be very easily engaged or stimulated. So it became pretty clear to us that it was going to be important to move him into a foster situation, because we wanted him to be in a place where he was going to be able to catch up on some of that nurturing and have some of that special attention. So he was in 3 different foster homes, and each foster home basically reported the same kind of behaviors and challenges in working with Cody.
So I guess I was a bit of a handful back then. I didn't really want to, apparently I didn't want to play with anyone. I was alone most of the time. You know, I read a file once that I was in like 3 different shelters, or sorry, 3 different group homes before I was like 3 years old. So, you know, I was a lot of moving around. Nobody really wanted to deal with a kid like that, I guess.
It was really determined through a plan of care that he needed permanency. He needed permanency planning. Unfortunately, the agency, CAS, we were not able to locate Crystal. She had really disappeared, and we weren't sure exactly what was happening with her. So in terms of the permanency planning for the adoption, we had to go ahead. That's when I met Ellie Lang and Janice Hamilton.